very good evening, everyone. I'm Mallika Bhadra, and I welcome you all to another episode of Chai, Chat, and Community on Word Palette. Today or tonight, from whichever part of the world you're listening to us, I want to talk about, or rather understand, the meaning of an idea of the concept of feminism. What does the word entail, and how can we use or not use it? On that note, I would like to welcome my guests for the evening. Joining me tonight are Navanita Bhattacharya from Melbourne and Ayda Malik all the way from Sweden. Hi, ladies. First of all, thank you for joining in, and a big thanks for saying yes for my chat and joining me tonight.
Thank you for
Before I
having
move forward, I would like you guys to introduce yourselves to all our listeners. Navanita, I'll start from you, and then I'll move on to Ayda.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, my name is Navanita Bhattacharya, and I'm joined by my mighty little girl, and she'll introduce herself shortly. How do I say? What do I say? I was born in India to feminist parents, and I am now raising a feminist child myself. I am in the domain of social justice. I've been working in this domain for the last 24 odd years. And I was telling Chris and Ayda just a few minutes before we started that I've been a global vagabond for the last 20 odd years, living in more than 16 different countries, working on various issues, which is primarily centered on gender equality and social inclusion. Moved to Australia in 2016 December, and only because this little person said she wanted to have the same set of friends every year for her birthday, and she didn't want to backpack with her crazy parents every now and then. So here we are, and very briefly, Chris, if you'll allow, Nisa wants to say who she is.
I'm Nisa, and feminism to me means equality and rights, because both boys and girls can do anything they want. Like girls can play basketball, so can boys do.
Thank you, Nisa. You can say good night to everyone and go to bed.
Thanks, Nisa. Thanks, Navanita. I'll move on to Ayda. Ayda, thank you for joining in, and please tell us about yourself.
My name is Ayda Malik. I'm 24 years old, born and raised in Sweden. I am half Azerbaijani from Iran, half Pakistani, Punjabi, and have been living here my whole life. Myself, I've also been raised with politically active parents, and especially from my mother's side, it's been very important not only to stand up for marginalized groups in every different question, but going from a perspective of feminism. She's been very stern on teaching us to just be the better person and improve ourselves for society. So I've always been interested in these questions and in some way try to work them with culture. So I'm studying right now Middle Eastern and North African studies, and I'm trying to incorporate these ideologies and ideas and thoughts into culture, which I love to work with in photography and filming.
That's amazing. Thank you, ladies, for that introduction. Navanita, I'll start with you first. Starting the chat with something that I want to know, and probably all our listeners will want to know as well. So, in your opinion, what is the concept of feminism? Like, what does a feminist believe in? What is your thought on it?
Right. And I'll pick up where Nisa started. She talked about, she believes that for her, feminism means equality, that what's okay for boys, it's okay for girls. What girls can do, boys can do equally well. And that is exactly what feminism, Chris, to me is. It's about fairness, it's about equity, it's about justice, it's about equality. It's about a world that is fairer, right? A world of happier people, a world with authentic people. A world where we are raising our children to be themselves, which is humans, not as boys or girls, and therefore squeezed into boxes and labeled, right? So, and having said that, I also want to say what we all know, that yes, men and women are different. Biologically, we are different. We have different sexual organs. We have different hormones. We have different biological abilities. It was me who kept Nisa in my womb. The husband gave the sperms. Men have more testosterone. Women have very less. All of those biological differences are there. Today, globally, the male-female population, as we all know, is more or less 50-50, right? More or less in most countries of the world. Yet, we see more men in positions of power and privilege, whether be it politics, whether be it corporate, whether be it even in the bloody household, right? And this systematic exclusion of women, not just from the political spaces, this systematic discrimination of women inside their homes, right? This systematic violation of women and girls in all spaces is why we need feminism. And that's the reason, to me, in very simple sense, is why we should all be feminists, unapologetically so.
Agreed. Before I move on to Ayda, your answer prompted me a very quick question, Navanita, which is you just said that we need equality, right? But in various conclaves or concourses, I've seen men talking about women empowerment. The topic is women empowerment, but on the panel, all you see are a couple of men.
Yes,
what do you have to say to that? About
Oh,
those
bloody hell. I can write books, Chris. Don't get me going on that. I mean, in 2021, the fact that we have dinosaurs who are designing such programs, we have fools who are allowing such things to happen, that to me is confounding. It's unfathomable. And this is exactly what patriarchy does. It continues to foster these narratives through these representation,
Thank you for spelling that out. I needed that. Ayda, you have mentioned that you have your roots in Pakistan and Iran as well. So now, how do you see the concept of feminism getting accepted or, getting birthed out in those societies? Do you think religion plays any kind of role in that mindset in those countries?
I mean, to be honest, I would be able to answer it the best when discussing diaspora in Sweden. But if I were to speak about the countries, I think as many other countries, there is a wave of feminism. There probably always has been, and it's developing, it's getting more space and everything, but that it needs more space for it to grow. I really do believe that religion and culture can affect it because both in positive and negative ways. But I think it's heading somewhere. I can't speak a lot for both countries too much because I haven't lived in them. I haven't been to Iran, for example. But looking at the women who come here, looking at the men who come here with their ideologies, with what they stand for and what they're fighting for, yes, I do think it's developing. I just think that people need to get more space to be able to, and not so many obstacles. We need to cooperate. And unfortunately, in our countries, it's very easy to, put those obstacles in front of people who are fighting for what's right.
But Ayda, when you mention of obstacles, where do you reckon, like I know you haven't been to these countries, but where do you think these obstacles are coming from? Are these in the minds or these are from mythological books? Where are they coming from, in your rough opinion?
To be fair, if we're going to compare Sweden to Pakistan and Iran, I think it's easier to get obstacles and actually fully on, apply these obstacles through the law. First of all, we have the law, and why are these laws, and why are these laws existing, and why are they being able to be applied? Well, because of the mindset, of the norms, of the culture, of how much people are comfortable with allowing people, women, men, non-binary people taking space. So we have the government. We have the mindset of the people, we have culture, we have norms, we have the patriarchy. I mean, a situation is very different upon, which part of Iran or which part of Pakistan you are in. Maybe one thing that I can discuss in my hometown in Iran can't be discussed in the more religious hometowns, in Iran. What I can discuss in my village in Pakistan, I might not be able to be discussing in more patriarchal cities in Pakistan. So that's also the clash. it's different.
Got it. All right. Next thing that I want to kind of bring in the chat is both of you. Is there any difference in the thought process or the mindset or outlook, however you want to spell it, in Eastern and Western feminism? By Eastern, I mean mostly South Asia. So, do you think there's a difference in mindset in these two societies? I'll start with you, Navanita, and then I'll come back to you, Ayda.
I would say yes, Chris, and that is because feminism in itself is not a unified movement. It's not a one voice, one women, as in women as a whole homogeneous group, and women are not a homogeneous group. It's not a unified movement. And like I said, it's because our world is diverse, right? With diverse cultures and diverse contexts, defining the diverse lives of diverse women. I mean, look at this in this virtual room. There are three of us. All three of us are diverse with various identities and various different stories. And here is where and you may have heard of the word intersectionality. Here is where the term intersectionality comes into play very clearly and strongly, where focus on the intersecting or the connecting oppressions, right, and privileges associated with ethnicity, with religion, with gender, sexuality, disability, age, caste, class, all of those come into play. But yet the traditional divisions of the Western and the Eastern worlds do exist. And taking on from what you asked, Ayda, and what she said, I would like to kind of talk about the Muslim women. And I'm talking about Muslim women, even though I'm not a Muslim woman. I recently worked in Somalia, and since moving to Australia in 2016, I have had the privilege of becoming very intimate friends with some ferociously magnificent Muslim women, right? So when we see, the narrative of the plight of the Muslim woman, the way it has panned out, right? We see it in people supporting and championing, say, Malala for standing up against the Taliban, right?
Yeah.
Yet, not talking about, in the same time, how neocolonialism in conduit with capitalism, like America, guns, war economy, all of that pans out, and how everything feeds patriarchy and keeps women in their place, right? The fact is that Muslim women face unique challenges which are specific to them, right? But criticizing Islam is an inadequate way to fight patriarchy, right? And that's what's been the Western narrative, and that's one way where I see a stark difference in the West and the East thing. And to me, and I've seen it a lot, even in the country where you and I come from, Chris, India, right? How Islamophobic portrayals have proved not only to be dangerous, but incorrect as well. I mean, you see it not just in a politician making comments, but you see the average Admi going wild, rampaging and raping Muslim women in the name of Hindu patriotism and all that thing. And that's the thing about the Western. So when we come back to the West and East, Western feminists often point to the evils imposed upon women in other less economically developed parts of the world. And there are quite a few countries in South Asia, Southeast Asia. Whether it is, female genital cutting to dowry deaths to honor killing and all of that. But continuing to ignore racism and sexism and ableism and classism in their own countries, and not linking it to how that impacts on women's rights and women's dignity and ability to live lives free of any kind of violations. So yes, there definitely is, I would say.
There's a difference. All right, Ayda, your thoughts on if at all there's a difference in these two mindsets?
Yes, I do believe there are differences. I mean, we can start with that feminism have come in so many waves, and that there are some who argue that feminism isn't a Western originated ideology, but comes actually from the other part of the world. I know growing up, we are taught feminism in my household, but of course, even my mom learned more, and then she taught us more. And for example, that feminism doesn't only, it's not unique to only binary gender, but there's a whole spectrum, and there's so many more perspectives to think about. Which Navanita mentioned, intersectionality. But I do realize growing up in Sweden that I had to channel whatever my identity is and find my path, being, a person of color, being a child of an immigrant, and a woman in Sweden, where it's a white country, it's a secular country. I'm coming from a Muslim background, and finding what actually of this feminism that is taught here applies to me and not. If you look at, if I would compare myself to a peer, a white woman, we're not sitting on the same background. We're not sitting on the same experiences or circumstances. And I find some Western people tend to want to save us. That's what their feminism is about, to save us. And although I have many, colleagues, friends, and peers that do understand that feminism isn't so white as it should be, and you do check themselves and understand where I'm coming from, there are a lot of people who think that they need to save me. No, I don't need to be saved. We all need to be putting this, effort together to look into perspectives more than just man and woman. Feminism is about your ethnic background. Race puts a lot of factor in it. Gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic circumstances, and that's what I've been, learning and growing up and channeling and finding myself that the feminism that I at least stand for should be taking these aspects and factors in consideration. But there is a very big difference, I would say, and even amongst us, people of color or non-Western people.
So, correct me if I'm getting it right from what both of you said. So, feminism now is more of inclusiveness, right? But it has become more of an attempt of salvaging people. Is that right? That people try to save us more than they try to understand what we are trying to tell them. Is it right? Or does this need to happen more?
I think it depends. I really do think it depends on who you're speaking with. I can see the difference in this speaking. If we're talking, for example, political parties in Sweden and who follow them, I can see a difference in speaking feminism with a person who's left than a person who's right-winged. And a lot of tendencies of, wanting to save and saying, we're all women and we're all in this together. No, we're not. Sorry. I mean, I don't have the same experience as a Black woman, and I won't even claim that I do. And then I need to be aware of that so I can see how I can be an ally. And the same goes for a white person, how they need to know that we're not in the same, situation. And the first step is being aware for you to help. And I think a lot of white women forget that, for example, we're not in the same boat. And when you tell them, they feel attacked. Because they're like, what? In feminism, I'm the victim. No, you're not. Always. Not always. There's levels.
Yeah. So there needs to be an awareness, is what I'm gathering from both of you. An open, holistic awareness. Navani, the next thing, moving on to you, and then again, I'll go back to Ayda. All of you just mentioned that there are this age-old concepts of class, climate, race, and patriarchy. But beyond that, I don't want to hear these terms now. Beyond these things, what are the other factors which are responsible for giving birth to feminism, or which can be used as an opportunity for creating women empowerment? Navanita, first I'll listen from you, then moving on to it.
Chris, to me, there is one straightforward response to this, and that what helps in women's empowerment is the absolute, total, complete absence of patriarchy. That is a fact. And patriarchy, when it intersects with capitalism, neocolonialism, and all of that, it's a fact we cannot escape from, we should not escape from, right? Having said that, what we do see is that when there are such horrific levels of violence against women and girls. So we need to ask, why is this happening? Why is there such horrific levels of violence against women and girls? Why is it that at the end of 2020, more than 100 million girls were not even allowed to take birth? Why is it that every 2 minutes, girls and women are raped in South Africa? Why is it that every day, 3 women are killed by their male partner in the United States? Why is it that we saw thousands of women literally 10 days ago marching in so many cities of Australia, demanding the mere right to live a life with dignity, free from any kinds of violence? And the male prime minister of a country which is called the first world, or in a Western world, was in complete, absolute, total denial. So we need to interrogate, we need to ask the why, and we will will know the reason for that, So if women and girls are allowed to live a life free from any fear, any violence, any boundaries, that the Lakshman Rekha that is put. Lakshman Rekha, Ayda, is, the myth of Ramayana, where Ram went away trying to protect Sita, and the other bloke who was there, Lakshman, drew that boundary and warned that woman not to cross it, else. And she crossed it, and mayhem happened, right? So and it's not a big ask, is it, Chris? It is not a big ask. The ask is simple. Please provide us with the right to live a life free from any kinds of violence, whether it is psychological violence, financial violence, physical violence, sexual violence, or violence imposed by the male-defined norms of religion, So to me, it's as simple as that. So we cannot escape from any of the isms that you mentioned before, because that remains the crux of it. Yeah.
All right, Ayda, moving on. Navanita just mentioned that the world which is free from any kinds of patriarchy. Do you reckon, or in your opinion, do you think that we are anywhere closer to achieving that society which is free, or which will be free from any levels of patriarchy surrounding us?
Is the question for me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Ayda, you can't escape. I'm kidding.
If we're close to getting to a feminist society and escaping patriarchy, honestly, no. I always believe that at some level, there will always exist patriarchy, because despite the confusion we have that we've gone so far and we've developed so much and we're really getting somewhere, yes, of course, we're allowing much more stuff to happen. But since when? 500 years back? 1,000 years back? It fluctuates. I mean, in some countries, they were actually more progressive until colonialism came in the situation and the whole atmosphere. So I think it fluctuates. If we're looking this from a Western perspective, when it comes to entailing their countries, they haven't had these questions raised and being aware until approximately, I'm sorry if I'm incorrect, but maybe 100 years back, from the 19th, 20th century. Regarding our countries, maybe even before. I think that we're gonna get ahead. I think our countries are developing if we have enough people who are, our allies and want to discuss this and want to evolve our countries and our societies. But I don't think ever that it will fully, eradicate that. I'm sorry, because men are comfortable, cis-normative, straight men, white men are very comfortable in the position they're in. And why would you change that? Why would you give that up? For who?
Absolutely. And Ayda, talking about white men, I'm sorry I jumped in, but to me, it's not just men. There are agents of patriarchy in women as well. So, and I call them the sons and daughters of patriarchy are alive and kicking, right? There are some women who continue to benefit from what patriarchy or the system that it entails provides for them. And therefore you see, and I know this is, aimed at South Asian audience, but Chris, this is where it intersects, right? Where in a country such as Australia, Ayda, you'll be surprised to know that there is a federal entity called the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. And that entity expects all workplaces to report annually on their gender equality status, and it is a binary entity. So it's looking at women as a homogeneous group. So it celebrated earlier this year when there was a tiny dip in the gender pay gap in the country. So from 14%, the gender pay gap dipped to 13 point something, and WGEA was wow. But nobody in Australia, no workplace in Australia is doing a diversity pay audit. And like you, Ayda, rightly mentioned, there are these various other identities beyond the binary that makes modern day feminism that much more intersectional. No one is talking about that. So sorry, again, I interrupted when you talked about men and white men, but there are all shades of men and all shades of women and all shades of others who don't identify as either, who continue to benefit from it. And that's because of power and privilege. And I'll stop that. And Ayda, after this show, you can get my neck and say this, never do that again.
No worries. I'm always welcome to be interrupted when hearing these amazing points. No, one thing also worth mentioning, and we're doing it right now in this combo, feminism entails more than just women, just like Navanita said, more than women and men, more than just white and black, and more than, rich or poor. It's there's so many spectrums, so many levels to consider. So yes, there are people who are benefiting from this. At the same time as I just got to learn this concept a couple of years ago. At the same time, we want to stand up for ourselves as women. White women tend to use this, the fragile white woman concept, and the way men look at them to get ahead, and maybe being listened to or taken care of at the expense of other people of color. So yeah, I do believe it's not only men, especially specifically white, cisnormative, straight men who benefit from it. I think a lot of people do. So why would they change it up? And that's why I don't believe it's going to completely eradicate, but we're getting somewhere. Definitely, for sure.
This brings me to two questions for you ladies. The first is, when Navanita mentioned that a lot of women are also kind of feeding onto this because for their own benefits. Is it their benefit they are feeding onto, or they are being forced to make it look like that they're using it to their advantage? What is the back scenario exactly? That's my first question. And the second is, then what do we have to say to actually those women or anyone who is misusing this concept for their own benefit and bringing the word down for people who actually want to uplift it? Two questions. First, I think I'll go with Navanita and then Ayda.
There is no straightforward linear response to that. I do believe that socialization plays a significant role in how people grow up into and what they believe, say, think, etc. But saying that, like for instance, my partner, Shiv, he grew up in a fairly rigid home, right? Where he saw and experienced domestic violence. So going by this logic, he should have turned into one of those. He didn't. So how, in spite of socialization that happens as you grow up in your childhood, as an adult with a thinking brain and with the opportunities you now have with information a mouse click away, there is no reason for you to not interrupt your biases, your prejudices, your ways of thinking and doing certain things which are harmful to others. right? So saying that, I will tell this, and I'll link it up to the second part of your question. What do I have to say about individuals who tend to misuse this? I will say, why the fuck are you doing it? Why? What purpose does it solve? Are you proud of yourself? Do you make great role models for the people in your life? If you are a caregiver and you have little children in your life, does it make you feel gung-ho and wonderful? I always question this, and I'm saying this because recently my 9-year-old experienced 2 incidents of racism in her school. And I chewed the school out, right? And in interrogating the issue with the principal and the vice principal, what was very clear is that these things are not being learned by little people as little as 7 and 8 and 9-year-old in isolation. They don't just pick it up from the schoolyard. They're learning it from their homes. They are seeing it in the monocultural portrayal in the media. They're seeing the sexist advertisements and the commentaries and the books that they're reading. So there are various factors which Ayda earlier had mentioned about the factors which shape patriarchy and feminism and all of that. So there are various factors we need to take into consideration while understanding this issue. Yeah.
Thanks, Navanita. Ayda, moving on to you. I know you might have mentioned or touched on a few of these topics early on, but just to reiterate again, 2 questions. Are women actually feeding on, or some of them are being forced to continue on the tradition? And the second question is, what do you have to say to all those, not just women, who are misusing this term?
I think for some women, it's about survival. It's about, speaking about and understanding, not justifying, but understanding intelligently that some things are learned. And maybe you haven't been in an environment where you can challenge it, or knowing that there are other alternatives. For example, looking back to my parents talking about certain things that, I didn't appreciate during my childhood. If it was like, maybe I didn't like this or I didn't like that, I would love for this. I realized in older age that this is the only thing they know, because they had this background living in this environment where there was like strict norms. And when I mean strict, I don't mean like they didn't have freedom. I meant more like this is the norms. They're not to budge. So I do believe that some do it because some feed onto, the patriarchal structure because they might not have the power to challenge it. That's maybe the only thing they know. They don't know an alternative, or, it's survival instinct. If I do it, then maybe I'll survive and then I can protect my children or whatever. But I do believe there are women who, do benefit from it. I do believe there are also sorts of people who, benefit from it. And I think if you have the opportunity to educate yourself, if you have the opportunity to question things, if you have the opportunity to voice your opinion, then why not? If I compare myself to my cousin in Pakistan, not because this wouldn't be possible in Pakistan, I'm speaking specifically about her. She lives in a small village where things are like they are. There is, she doesn't have time to think about what is feminism. If she wants to, yeah, sure. But like, I think her focus right now is, okay, how are we going to make it today economically? What do I need to do at home? What do I need to do so we can get around, money wise? She doesn't have that much of a room and space as I do. I'm actually, in comparison to her, I'm living a very luxurious life and being able to, sit in my mom's house, an apartment that's bought here in Sweden, getting free education, good access to internet information, libraries, workshops, political parties, organizations. Even as a woman, I have more space and, even courage. I've been taught the courage to go out and do whatever I want in comparison to her. So one thing I would love to say is that if you have the opportunity, please, please, please take that opportunity, because we take it for granted. Not only, if not for others, for yourself, because people are selfish. human beings, we are selfish. It's really horrible to say, but we are a little teeny bit. So if not for others, for yourself, educate yourself. Get involved. Why not? It's for the better.
Now, you both have touched on very relevant points, but I
Chris,
think I have.
can I quickly say something here?
Sure.
And the point I want to make here is that, and the example that you gave, Ayda, it's related to that. 24 years ago when I first started work, I started working in the villages in the Indo-Nepal border. And my role was to work with the women, mobilizing them into self-help groups and link them up with banks, national banks, to get them, access to finance in order to. So it was a very intense 2 years of work, which paid off. But these were really poor women living below the poverty line, but they understood that they are not powerless. And that's where we need to interrogate power in a more nuanced way, that none of us are ever powerless, just like none of us are ever without any sorts of privileges, right? So there are power to do something, whether it's harm or good. There is the other kind of power which a lot of women in different circumstances take solace from, is the power within. The power within myself to kind of change, like what Ayda, you mentioned, wanting to know and wanting to kind of seek more information and help and all. But there's also the power too. The power which comes from being in networks, the whole, and that's what feminists and feminist movements are about. So those women from more than 25 odd villages, by the end of 2 years, they had formed all of these self-help groups, and and you touched upon the white saviorism thing, and it is something so visible in the sector that I work in, Ayda, in the international development and humanitarian aid. That narratives such as this are seldom talked about in mainstream media, because it's the saviorism that people have more appetite to. But the fact is that, there are these small, medium, large, extra large feminist movements all over the world, because feminism has always been with us across the world in any country. It was never a Western concept, as is the myth. Just like the whole bloody myth of it being a bra burning thing, that's a bloody myth. Just like all the fables that we grew up with. And I can go on about this bra burning thingy, but I wanted to touch upon this narrative which gets perpetuated in mainstream media about the rich and the poor and all of that.
Right. Quickly, I'll address all the wonderful people who've joined in. Pravati says, wonderful discussion. Thanks, Pravati. Nisreen, she's, I think, your friend, she's watching from Sweden and she's drinking chai to this. Thank you for making my morning. You all amazing. Navanita, wow, just right. Thanks, Nisreen, for joining in. Who all are there? Mariam, so important to talk about this, such great voices. Thanks a lot, Mariam. Aun Saleh, she says, Navanita, wow. Thanks, Saleh. Great going. Thanks, Ma, for joining in, as always. And Nisreen again, Ayda, you're amazing, telling the truth. Of course, she is amazing. Thanks, Nisreen. And Salia says, bravo, Ayda.
Thank you.
All right, I'm mindful of the time, ladies, but before we wrap up, I know this is
no, you can't. You can't wrap up.
You really got interesting now.
I have to, unfortunately.
But it's good to see you smile, Chris.
Thanks. This is an ongoing discussion, but just to wrap up the whole conversation, I was on Instagram and recently I saw this tweet by a woman. They've started this chain whereby they say that, oh, I'm going braless because this is women empowerment. I don't need anything to stop myself from expressing myself. Do you ladies think that is the correct way moving forward? Just by going braless, you attaining empowerment? Ayda, you first.
There are always things that we can criticize about how people go about discussing questions concerning feminism. For me, I really, it doesn't bother me if a woman thinks that the only, that's a, relevant question, whether to wear a bra or not. Because in a way she is commenting, the society's control of the body. Now, is this the only problem in the world? No. If she were to argue that this is the worst problem in the world, that, you have to tackle this first, I would say, hold up. We got women who are being held captive, kidnapped, being exposed to honor culture, are being domestically, exposed to violence, whatever. The list goes on. I mean, it may, and that's where we get back to, what is a problem for you, depending on who you are. For some women, that could be the worst problem in their world because they're not being exposed to stuff that other women are. For example, racism, honor culture, violence, God knows what, immigrants, and not knowing that, you're safe in this country that you're living in. So for me, it doesn't bother me, but I think it wakes and it reminds me that we need to be aware of how we discuss it. Don't discuss it as the sole problem, and we can't compare struggles sometimes. We have to, put them in different categories.
Thanks. Pravati has a question. Let's first understand what is feminism, right? So while I'm wrapping up, let's just try to again put one sentence to the face of feminism. Navanita, you first, and then Ayda, and then we'll close up the conversation for the night. What is feminism?
I've said it earlier. To me, it is to listen to, learn from different kinds of feminists. It is to acknowledge that the lives that different humans are leading today are grossly, unfairly unequal. It is to understand and be very, very angry about that women and girls are not even given the basic right to live a life free from any kind of violation. To me, that is feminism. And it is about acknowledging that there cannot be one feminism or one kind of feminism. And for heaven's sake, bury that bra burning feminism myth. It's just that it is a myth. So it is also knowing that patriarchy remains active. The agents of patriarchy, the men, women, and those who identify as neither remain active. And that is because there are several people who continue to benefit from the system that is patriarchy and the system that it intersects with, which is capitalism and neo-colonial ways of working across the world. So to me, that is feminism.
Thanks. That was amazing, Navanita. Ayda, moving on to you. What is feminism to you?
If you would ask me 10 years ago, I would say the same rights for women and men, because that's what we were taught. Growing up and, being exposed to other people with different experiences and backgrounds, I would say that, feminism is an ideology which comments the structures of society, meaning that it's not only about, empowering women, it's about speaking and standing up for all kinds of marginalized groups, people who are living in socioeconomic circumstances which aren't, that great. Standing up for non-binary people, standing up for people of color, even, other people of color that might not look like you. It entails so much. So for me, feminism is a reminder of being open to listen and evolve, improving yourself to improve your society, improving yourself to improve your own circumstances. It's an ongoing movement, it's an ongoing battle, and even though we come from different backgrounds and we're not in the same boat, I think it does unify people in having, hopefully, I hope so, having the same goal. we can learn so much from each other, and we can really contribute so much to each other's lives. So that's what's feminism for me.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you. I
Chris,
hope
can I quickly add? This is a conversation I had last week with in NISA school with little people, and talking to them about feminism and explaining to them what feminism means. They said, "Why don't you call yourself a humanism? Humanistic?" You know, they went wild talking about linking it up with being human. And so for me to tell them that the reason why it is fem, which is related to female, which is related to women, is because the unequal power relations that exists between women and and men, and women is not a homogeneous group. Like Ayda rightly said, there are various shades and colors and identities there. So anyone listening in who says that I am not a feminist, I'm a humanist, I would say, please go in and have a read again. And I will be very happy to have a chat again. There's a particular reason why activists all over the world continue to say it's feminism, because, even as we talk, there are hundreds of women across the world being killed or are committing or dying by suicide just because they are who they are and because of everything that we talked about.
Thank you, ladies, for joining in. This was a very crucial conversation that needed to be had. I hope all the people joining in had some good thoughts and insights to take away from our chat. For all the listeners who commented, thank you again. We'll be back shortly with another episode. And till then, keep watching Chai Chat and Community on Word Palette. Have a great night and have a great morning to all those people who joined us.
Shabaket. Have a lovely day, Ayda. Nice meeting you.
You too.
Thanks for